America in Prophecy. The title says, An Image to the Beast. Let's now go a little bit deeper in the system and find out about the various statues and monuments and how does this whole thing fit together. Here's an image of the Statue of Liberty. As you can see, it's the female with the 7 rays on her head holding up the light. This is a symbol for the goddess Mitra, or the god Mitra, with portrayed as a goddess holding the light. Does this sound familiar? The male, female. The god Mitra, the sun god, holding up the light bearer, the Lucifer. This is an insider image of the female goddess of the sun. Let's see what it says from MasonicWorld.com. It says, on Washington's birthday, 1877, Congress accepted the statue in the name of the United States as a gift from the French people. It had been a tradition in America to have the cornerstones of major public and private buildings and monuments consecrated with full Masonic rites. The most worshipful Grand Master posed a question. Why call upon the Masonic fraternity to lay the cornerstone of such a structure as is here to be erected? His answer, which is as true today as it was then, was, no institution has done more to promote liberty and to free men from the trammels and the chains of ignorance and tyranny than has Freemasonry. So what is he claiming here? He says no institution has done more to promote liberty. Liberty from what? Freedom from what? Well, the high Freemasons, which law do they abide by? God's law? Bible law? No. Liberty from that law and what they call the trammels and chains of ignorance and injustice. That's why Masons wear this little apron, because it represents covering up what happened in the Garden of Eden. And there, it was Lucifer, as far as I'm concerned. Satan said, you won't surely die, you'll become as gods, you'll have the knowledge of good and evil. So here, what's stated is, no institution has done more to promote liberty, freedom, right? And to free men from the trammels and chains of ignorance and tyranny. So that what happened in the Garden of Eden is the freedom that was given to mankind. And that's why Masons wear this thing, this little apron, to remind them of the freedom from ignorance and tyranny that happened in the Garden of Eden. It says, at the consecration ceremony, Deputy Grand Master R.W. Brother Lawrence said in part, liberty enlightening the world, how lofty the thought. And it is now a universally admitted truth that only in proportion as men become possessed of liberty, that they do become civilized, enlightened, and useful. Can you hear the words? You have to become possessed of liberty to become civilized, enlightened, and useful. Well, quite frankly, I think I'm pretty useful, just not to Satan. I think by this time through these lectures, he's pretty cross with us for recording these DVDs. So, in accordance to what he says, it's a universally admitted truth that as men become more possessed of liberty, as Adam and Eve were, they become civilized, enlightened, and useful. Satanic, that's what it is, not godly. All you have to do is go to the Statue of Liberty itself, and you go and have a look at the base, the foundation, and there you'll see the cornerstone and what is on it. There you have it, the image of the symbol, at least, of Freemasonry. This is a Masonic symbol. This is a Masonic image, a statue put together, pointing towards the representation of the Statue of Liberty, the male, female that brought the light into the world, the Lucifer, the light bearer. And why is it important to look at that? Because which year did America receive its recognition by France? 1798. And there's a Statue of Liberty in America, and not many people realize this, but here you have the image of the Statue of Liberty in France. Light encircling and enlightening the world. What lofty a thought, they say. Well, France passing over the light to America to say, right, now you run with this. You take control of the 7-rayed sun god Mitra. So what about the Capitol Hill? Is anything interesting about Capitol Hill? Well, I'm going to go into the dome later on in the lecture, but let's just find out what happened at the laying of the cornerstone. Here's the image. As always, you see George Washington with his Masonic regalia on. You can see all the masons standing around the top edge of the where the cornerstone is being laid, all wearing their Freemason aprons, covering up the nakedness from the Garden of Eden. It says the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building was laid with Masonic honors on December 18, 1793, under the auspices of the Grand Lodge of Maryland. You see, even the Capitol Hill has to be laid with Masonic honors. Now, what I'd like to ask you, do you know why this building is called Capitol Hill? This magnificent building, and it truly is a magnificent. Why call it Capitol Hill? Well, we have to go and do a little bit of background research to find out about this. Wikipedia says that capital is a term used to describe the seat of government. It is derived from the Capitoline Hill, Latin Capitolinus Mons, in where? Rome, the seat of the Roman Republic. So Capitol comes from Capitoline, the seat of the Roman Republic. What else can we find out? Columbia Electronic Encyclopedia says Capitoline Hill or Capitol, the highest of the 7 hills of ancient Rome, historic and religious center of the city. The great temple of Jupiter, Capitolinus, was dedicated in 509 BC. So Capitol comes from Capitoline, which is the seat of power in Rome. And Capitolinus was the great temple of Jupiter. So somehow Jupiter's involved, Jupiter being the sun god. We'll get to that now. What does it say about Jupiter? Jupiter, in Roman religion and mythology, the supreme god, originally a sky deity, he developed into the great father god, prime protector of the state. Jupiter was the supreme god of the Roman pantheon, a god of light and sky and protector of the state and its laws. Listen now. It says, one of his most ancient epithets is Lucetius, the light bringer. Does that sound familiar? Lucetius, Lucifer, the idea of the Lucistrus, the light bearer or the light bringer. So here you have basically Capitol coming from Capitoline, which is the seat of Rome, the power seat of Rome. Capitoline is also the name for the house of Jupiter, or the temple to Jupiter, the sun god, the chief solar deity, the father god. And this is also known as Lucetius. Interesting how this all starts to make sense and fit together. SAHebRoots.com explains that we find that tangible form of Zeus or Jupiter worship exists to this present day. It is commonly known and also told by the guides of the Vatican that the bronze statue of St. Peter in St. Peter's in Rome is the ancient pagan image of Jupiter, which was adopted, canonized, and sanctified. The same image is being reverenced and is one big toe regularly kissed at certain ceremonies. There's an image of this so-called St. Peter in the Vatican. Actually, and even the guides when you're walking through the Vatican will tell you it's not really St. Peter, it's actually an image of Jupiter. And there he sits with his 2 fingers and his sun disk. And people walk past and kiss his toe, and his foot is already smooth from the hundreds of thousands, millions of people that have gone past and kissed the foot of this sun god, thinking that it's the founding apostle Peter. It's actually pointing towards Simon Magus, not Simon Peter, but that's a different story. So here, inside the Capitolinus or Capitoline, sits Jupiter, the sun god. And Capitol in America gets its name from that. Do you remember the sanctuary we were supposed to face west and worship Yahweh in the west? Or we could turn around and face east and get the sun god in the east? And this was also showed in the sanctuary facing west and Freemasonry's symbol facing east. Well, all we have to do is go and do a satellite image of the Vatican, and we can see exactly in which direction it's pointing. Can you see the entire Vatican structure is pointing east? So in actual fact, we could swap out the Masonic temple with the image of the Vatican, and you would see that the one, which is the Vatican, is an upside down image, inverse image of the sanctuary of the temple of God. If the Pope stands at his balcony and he looks out towards the obelisk, which is the sun god, he's facing east. So he would be worshipping towards the east. Every time he comes out and a new Pope is elected and he steps out on the balcony and he does his little royal wave, he's actually facing the east, right? Okay, so let's zoom out our cameras now and we pop across to the other side of the world and we zoom back in on Capitol Hill. That was Capitoline. Let's go to the Capitol. Here you have an image of Capitol Hill. Beautiful building, as you can see from the top, with a dome in the middle. And interesting to note that this building is facing due west, perfectly facing west. And if we zoom out a little bit more, you'll see that it's facing the sun pillar, the image of the, remember that obelisk, the place of the residing place of the sun god? Okay, so there you have Vatican facing east, Capitoline, and you got Capitol facing west. This one's facing an obelisk, a sun god, sun pillar, and this one's facing a sun pillar. How does this fit together? Let's shoot out to space. Go right back, and go up above the North Pole, as it were, and look down at the Earth. You'll see the longitudes and the latitudes of the Earth. Now, notice for a moment that the Capitol Hill in the United States is almost on the same latitude as the Vatican. Can you see it's almost on the same latitude? Let me turn the world over to the side a little bit, and there you'll see Capitoline and Vatican almost on the same latitude. Why is this important? Well, I want to just drop these images in, and then you'll understand what I'm trying to get at. Remember, what's this lecture called? An image to the beast, right? So here you have Capitoline Hill in Rome facing one way. There you have Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. facing a different way. Can you see Rome is facing east and Capitol Hill is facing west? What do you notice about that? Can you see that they're actually facing one another? Notice for a moment how the one actually points to the other. So if the papacy is now standing at his balcony, the Pope is standing at his balcony, he's looking out towards the sun pillar, he's actually looking at whom? Go around. He's looking at America. And say, for example, now a president is standing on the Capitol balcony and he's looking at the sun pillar and he's looking over the horizon. Where is he looking? Think about it. He's looking at the Vatican. So the two are actually facing each other. Does this possibly somehow represent an image to the beast? Revelation 13 verse 14 says, "And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast." Just look at this for a moment. There you have Capitoline Hill on the left and Capitol Hill on the right. You could almost put a mirror in between them and you'd see that you'd have a mirror image, one of the other. Capitoline Hill looking towards Capitol Hill, the merging of the two capitols. One which ran away from Rome, but is coming back to Rome. Now, the Constitution ensured that the United States would not be a fascist type monarchy. That was the one horn, right, of the Lamb. Religious liberty and liberty from a monarch that would have this fascist type control, all power under one man. That's what fascism means, all power under one man. And the Constitution said, no. From now on, it'll be a type of democracy. And people came to America to escape exactly that, the persecution of this fascist monarchy of Rome. It seems truly like this American power is starting to fulfill prophecy more and more and more. From the time of President Washington until today, the people in charge have furiously been working behind the scenes on two main elements. Number one, to open the way for free communication between America and Rome, which would be in contradiction to their reasons they founded America. In other words, according to Revelation 13:14, they would make an image to the beast, And number two, they would grow into the world's greatest superpower in order to be able to continue unchallenged to enforce Rome's laws and be able to take out Rome's commandments when the time is right. And this was explained in Revelation 13:15. Cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So worldwide, this American power is going to drive the whole world to, number one, acknowledge the first beast and bow down to it. And if you do not bow down to it, you will be killed. So they first have to open communications to Rome, and secondly, they have to become a world superpower. 20 years ago, if we said, well, the Bible says that America is going to be a superpower, we would have laughed about it, because who was the superpower at the time? The USSR. Now, what do we know today? Is it a slightly different picture? For sure. America is starting to fulfill the prophecies. So how close are we really to the United States having a full image of the beast? Well, Alberto explains about a secret sign that was to be given amongst the Jesuit order. It says the following. A secret sign was to be given to the Jesuits worldwide when the ecumenical movement had successfully wiped out Protestantism in preparation for the signing of a concordat between the Vatican and the United States. The sign was to be when a president of the United States took his oath of office facing an obelisk. This is interesting. So according to this Jesuit priest, there's a secret symbol or a secret sign that will be issued that'll give the signal to all the Jesuits worldwide that when the president of the country gives his oath facing an obelisk, that'll be the signal that ecumenism has wiped out Protestantism. So let's look again at a satellite image of the Capitol and tell me on which side of the Capitol is the obelisk. You see there? It's on the western side of the Capitol. So at the time that the president has his inauguration or somehow takes his oath of inauguration, his oath of office as it were, facing that obelisk, that would be the signal to Jesuits worldwide. So they would have to move the inauguration ceremony from the east portico to the west side of the Capitol. Not many people understand that in history it has always been the requirement of the American president to be inaugurated on the eastern side of the Capitol. Here's a list of presidential inaugurations that have taken place since the beginning of America's Constitution. Just after that, March 4, 1829, the very first president was sworn in, President Andrew Jackson. Do you notice as I zoom in, he was the location of that inauguration ceremony was on the east portico. After that, Martin van Buren, east portico. William H. Harrison, east portico. James K. Polk, east portico. And it goes on, Zachary Taylor, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, Abraham Lincoln, east portico, east portico, east portico, east portico, east portico. And you can go through the list all the way from 1829 to 1845 to 1877, 1917, 1921. All of them are east portico, east portico, east portico. What do you notice about 1961 onwards? John F. Kennedy, east portico. 1965, Lyndon Johnson, east portico. 1969, east portico. Richard Nixon, east portico. 1977, James Carter, east portico. And then what do you see there? January 20, 1981, Ronald Reagan, west front of the United States Capitol. 1989, George W. Bush, west front. 1993, William Clinton, west front. 1997, William Clinton, west front. 2001, George Bush, west front. 2005, George Bush, west front. So in history, we've had east portico, east portico, east portico, east portico, east portico throughout history, and all of a sudden in 1981, boom! West portico, or west front at least, west front, west front, west front. Isn't that amazing? The Jesuits understood that the ceremony of inauguration had to be moved to the west front when Protestantism had been wiped out through the ecumenical movement. And from that day onwards, the president, when he now raises his hand and he swears allegiance pointing towards the Sun Temple or the obelisk, he's actually facing Rome. He's now swearing allegiance to protect America, and he's actually saying it facing Rome. Newsweek, January 26, 1981, page 34, says, for the first time in history, the swearing-in ceremonies were moved to the west front of the Capitol, and President Reagan faced the Washington Monument. This happened January 20, 1981. There's the image. There you can see President Reagan as he faces the obelisk towards the west. It says in usgovernmentinfo.about.com, since the first inauguration of President Reagan in 1981, the swearing ceremonies have been held on the west front of the United States Capitol building. The only exception was in 1985, swearing in of President Reagan's second term, when cold weather forced the ceremony into the Capitol Rotunda. How close are we to the fulfillment of these prophecies? We are that close. From 1981 onwards, the inauguration ceremonies have taken place facing the obelisk. And not only that, Ronald Reagan, here you see an image of him as he faces the sun temple, or the dwelling place of the sun god, this obelisk. He's facing Capitoline Hill. Capitol pointing to Capitoline. Here's an image of Pope Benedict overlooking St. Peter's Square on Sunday, the April 16th, 2006. He's looking at the sun obelisk, and where's he actually looking? He's looking at Rome. You see, if they were to have turned Capitol Hill around, they would never be able to make an image to the beast, because they would be riding like in a bus. So they would have to point each other around the globe to have the same meaning, either this way or that way. And for the first time in history, from then onwards at least, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, they're all swearing towards Rome and showing openly their affiliation towards sun worship. Here's an image of Ronald and Nancy Reagan, Tuesday, January 20, 1981. Yay, we the victors. Very sad to realize what they were actually busy with. So the all-important question is to ask is, did anything significant change between the United States and Rome after that fateful day of January 20, 1981? Remember, what was the reason America was founded? Was to get away from Rome, to get away from the persecution. What changed after January 20, 1981? Anything? Go and have a look in your average encyclopedia. Nothing fancy. I'll use the free one on the internet. Go and have a look up 1984. What do you see? January 10, 1984. The United States and the Vatican establish full diplomatic relations, in contradiction to the founding reasons of the United States. The reason that this country was built, the channels are opened to the Vatican. Where Reagan was the first president to face the Vatican during his swearing-in ceremony, 3 years later he opens up full diplomatic relations to the Vatican. See how this fits together? And then when he was invited to go and visit the Pope, he dresses in brown to show that he's still a Protestant. He's still fighting against the Catholics. He's not in full submission. If he was to wear black, he would be in full submission. Here he wears brown to make both sides feel comfortable. He's not wearing white, but he's certainly not wearing black. Helps to make the Protestants more comfortable. And then Time magazine had this incredible signal picture where you see John Paul with his silence. He says, shh, and Reagan looking at John Paul. Time magazine, Holy Alliance. You see the coming together of America and the Vatican? Here's an image of the Clinton inauguration. You'll see all the tents, the millions of dollars that are spent on these inauguration ceremonies. Which side of the Capitol are they busy on? The western side, the side of the sun obelisk. There you see him being sworn in with the obelisk in the background. There's another image of these people in their masses flocking to these lawns. They don't have a clue what's busy going on. The whole of America, the American system has been built as it was foretold in prophecy to drive America back to Rome. And as of 1981, the final walls have been taken down. Now people say, well, it's the leadership of the country lies in certain attributes that you might have. Well, when George Bush came to power, it became very apparent that it's certainly not brains that win you the presidency. As you can see in this image, he's been taken, photos have been taken of him sometimes in hilarious situations. He also says some magnificent things. He says, as an example, the vast majority of our imports come from outside the country. He says, it isn't pollution that's harming the environment, it's the impurity in our air and water that are doing it. And then he said, oh, I know how hard it is for you to put food on your family. It's not brains that win you the presidency. And if it's not brains, then what is it? See, it's got to do with bloodlines. And when you speak about bloodlines, people say, oh, this is conspiracy theory. No, just slow down. Bear with me. I'm not reading David Icke's book on conspiracy theories. I'm reading Reuters, news people, right? Find out what they say about George Bush's bloodline. Bush is closely related to every European monarch on and off the throne and has kingship with every member of British's royal family. He is the 13th, listen to that number, the 13th cousin of Britain's Queen Mother and of her daughter Queen Elizabeth, and is the 13th cousin once removed of the heir to the throne, Prince Charles. He has a direct descendant from Henry III and from Henry VIII's sister Mary Tudor, who was also the wife of Louis XI of France. He is also descended from Charles II of England. So why is George Bush in charge? Because he's fulfilling a certain role. But how's this possible? Do you remember in the lecture where I showed you in the New Age lecture, all the Bushes that had the same great-great-great-great-grandfather as Winston Churchill, as all the various other leaders? It's the same problem that we have here, because there's always this family bloodline that runs through. Okay? So what would have happened if Al Gore had won the election? What would have happened? Because if Bush had come in, he would have had affiliations back to England, right? What if Al Gore had won it? Well, let's find out. Being a descendant of Edward I, Gore is also a cousin of former US President Richard Nixon. But Gore does have direct links to the Holy Roman Empire. He is a descendant of the Roman emperors Louis II, Charles II, and Louis I, and is therefore also a direct descendant of Charlemagne, the 8th century emperor. The problem is that Gore's Charlemagne links also make him a cousin of George W. Bush. So does it matter who wins, the guy in the red tie or the guy in the blue tie? Doesn't matter. It's certainly not brains that get you there, it's bloodline. Civiltà Cattolica, the house organ of the Jesuits, said the following: fascism is the regime that corresponds most closely to the concepts of the Church of Rome. Now we understand that because it's all power under one man, the papacy being that man. The Roman kingdom has always been a dictatorial fascist system. And its type of government is the government that America was set up to run away from. But in order to get America to come back to Rome, fascism has to somehow be seen in America. Is this possible? Is it possible that somewhere we can see fascist tendencies in America, which is supposed to be the world's biggest and most profound democracy in the world? Well, please remember that the best place to hide something is in plain sight. So let's have a look around in America and see if we can see anything. Here's an image of George Bush greeting the members of the Knights of Columbus after the remarks to the 122nd Annual Knights of Columbus Convention in Dallas, Texas on Tuesday, August the 3rd, 2004. These are an interesting group of people. It's understood that you have to be a Catholic to be a part of the Knights of Columbus. And here, George Bush, wearing his black, white, blue uniform. On August 3rd, he says, President Bush told an effervescent crowd of 2,500 Catholics, these Knights of Columbus, at the annual convention, that they have a friend in the White House. Now, if George Bush says the Knights of Columbus have got a friend in the White House, it means that the Knights of Columbus have got a friend in the White House. What is the principal business for the Knights of Columbus? Well, Romanism, A Menace to the Nation by Jeremiah J. Crowley explains that the Knights of Columbus' principal business is Jesuitical politics. The Knights of Columbus, their principal business is Jesuitical politics, And George Bush says, your Jesuitical politicians and the games you're playing have got a friend in the White House. That's interesting. That's why when you see George Bush sitting with the Pope John Paul II at the time, you'll see the image is done of him sitting in front of Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit movement. So the Knights of Columbus have got an interesting symbol on their badge or their logo. You can see K of C, the Knights of Columbus. And now, what is that in the middle? What is that symbol? That symbol is what's called the fasces or the fasciae. It was a symbol used widely in the Roman Empire, and it consists of rods bound together around an axe, sometimes a spear. The symbolism is of the people and the countries bound together under a common centralized dictatorship. That's what the axe represents. So you've got all the people, which are the little rods, bound together underneath a dictatorship. The symbol of fascism is the axe or the spear with all the rods bound around it. Okay? Have a look at this image for a moment and tell me what you see. This is on Clinton's inaugural address in front of image of the fasces at the Lincoln Memorial. Can you see the Lincoln Memorial has got the fasces under the armrests? Lincoln is sitting with them under the armrests. And there, Bill Clinton has this image of the fasciae embedded behind him in the screen as he's busy with his inaugural address. Also wearing the black, white, red Masonic uniform. Not only that, if you go to you have a look at the two large crossed fasciae or fasces that compose the insignia of the National Guard, creating a huge X superimposed upon the winged eagle. Just to show you that this is what Mussolini used, here's a fashioned Italian postage stamp from the period of the Second World War. Can you see there? The axe, the rods around the axe. This is the symbol of fascism. Why then, I ask, is the fasces on the US coins? Here you have United States of America, $1 with the fasciae on it. There you have $5, a special printed $5 version, United States of America, with two fascist symbols. Another one in 2001, In God We Trust, liberty, with fascism as the symbol. Isn't that amazing? The best place to hide something is where? In plain sight. Okay, where else can we see the symbol of fascism, this one ruler, this anti-democratic symbol? You won't believe it, but it's on the wall in the House of Representatives. Here's an image. Here you see the Roman fasces on the wall behind the Speaker's podium at the US House of Representatives chamber. There is, when it's full, when George Bush is doing his presidential State of the Union address, there you can see it embedded on left-hand side and on the right-hand side of the American flag. The best place to hide something is in plain sight. It is also said that wherever a totalitarian movement erupts, whether communist or Nazi, a Jesuit can be found in the role of advisor or leader. In Cuba, it was Castro's father, Armando Lorente. Wherever there's a fascist system, there you'll find the Jesuit finger, because the Jesuits say the closest association politically to Rome is fascism. So all these links point towards things that are not well known. At the moment in the world, America is seen as a democracy. But I'll show you in the next lecture how these various things are happening underground to gain power, more and more power, underneath the pen of George W. Bush. Not only that, the government is leaning more and more towards a fascist type government, and people don't understand what's going on. Let's stop that for a moment and go back to the Capitol Hill. I've showed you what it looks like from the outside, with turning towards facing Rome, making an image to the beast, and how Rome faces the Capitol, etc., etc. But let's go inside the Capitol building. What can we see there? Well, as you walk inside the Capitol, you look up towards the ceiling, and there you see this dome imprint, or this image that's painted on the top of the dome. It is an unbelievable picture. On top, you've got this huge dome, and right in the middle, you've got this painting that has got some interesting features. Now, I cannot tell you what it's all about, so I'll refer you to a website that, or even the books of an organization called the Architect of the Capitol. They maintain, run, and keep in the proper state all these government buildings, these high-level government buildings. The apple of their eye is the Capitol building in the United States. So let's ask them, please could you tell us, what is this image suspended up on the ceiling? From their own website, they say, suspended 180 feet, which is about 60 meters above the rotunda floor, that's where you walk in, the fresco covers an area of 4,664 square feet. The figures, those images, those people, up to 15 feet tall, were painted to be intelligible from close up as well as from 180 feet below. Okay, this is an occult way of painting. Firstly, these images are 15 feet tall, some of them. I'm 6'5". I'm almost 2 meters tall. That's a huge painting if one of them is 15 feet, right? Secondly, it's been painted that when you're on the ground floor and you're looking up, you cannot see what the image is. That's how it's been designed. Also, if you had to put scaffolding up and go right there to the painting and have to clean it, you also wouldn't be able to recognize what it is. So you have to go sort of halfway in between. That's a way of hiding something in plain sight. What is halfway in between? What would we see if we were halfway between the rotunda floor and this image? Well, here's an image of it. Have a look. What do you see? Interestingly enough, you see George Washington sitting at the bottom, and around him are 13 maidens. 13, the occult number, 13 maidens. And you'll see the one on his right-hand side, the woman, the maiden sitting on his right-hand side, has got the fascist symbol in her hand. Well, what is this image called, according to the architect of the Capitol? They say it's called George Washington rising to the heavens. I thought to myself, what on earth does that mean, George Washington rising to the heavens? And then I read on, it says, George Washington rising to the heavens in glory, linked by female figures representing liberty and victory or fame. A rainbow arches at his feet and 13 maidens. The word apotheosis in the title means literally the raising of a person to the rank of a god. Wow! In the Capitol Hill, in the dome, you've got George Washington being raised up into the rank of a god. You remember he was the Freemason, the highest or most profound Freemason in America? He's been raised to the rank of a god. Does this sound like God language or serpent language? You will have the knowledge of good and evil. That's why when you walk into a Masonic temple, you walk over black and white squares. You'll have the knowledge of good and evil. Knowing good and evil, you will become like gods. In other words, you will evolve to a certain level of godhood. Now you know why George Washington is as important as he is in the history of America. Here in the Capitol, on the dome, he is being raised to the level of a god. And now he has this rank with 13 maidens around him, and the one next to him is holding the fasciae or the fasces. Okay, so let's continue. What does the apotheosis mean? Well, they said it's the word apotheosis in the title literally means the raising of a person to the rank of a god. Well, this apotheosis, this drawing of Washington, is in the ceiling of the dome. If George Washington is being raised towards the rank of a god, it means he's floating up towards heaven, right? So let's go outside the building and say, what is above this dome image? Let's go upwards. What you see above the dome is what's known as the Statue of Freedom. There's a little bit of a closer image of it. Question, what do you see under the Statue of Freedom? Let me zoom it up even more for you. What do you see there? Fasciae, all the way around the bottom of the Capitol Hill statue, right at the top of the Statue of Freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from God. This is going back to the Garden of Eden, the same lie that's gone over and over and over and over. They've got it embedded in the Capitol Hill, right at the top. Fasciae, fasces at the base underneath the Statue of Freedom. And this is all freedom of choice, freedom of this, liberty of that. But most importantly, occultly hidden in there is all power under one man. Which man? Well, that's the question. I can tell you, but I'd prefer not to. So what I'll do is I'll say, can you tell us, please, which man? Watch this video clip and make up your own mind.
2,400 of his faithful here to welcome him. He's waving to the crowd. Archbishop Regali is alongside the Pope as he shakes hands with the First Lady.
We honor you for helping to lead a revolution of values and spirit in Central Europe and the former Soviet Union, freeing millions to live by conscience, not coercion, and freeing all of us from the constant fear of nuclear war. Your Holiness, on behalf of all of us gathered here today, indeed on behalf of all the people of our beloved nation, we welcome you back to America.
Listen carefully.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Holiness Pope John Paul II and the Vice President of the United States and Archbishop.
We welcome you back to America. This is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, warning us that ahead of time the Lord says, but be careful. Here will be another beast that rises out of the earth, and it's going to start speaking like a dragon. In other words, it's going to make Luciferian type sounds. Not only that, it's going to drive people to accept Rome. And it will accept the papal power as the power of choice. Later on in time, we just have to go down the row a little bit in time, and there you see George Bush handing a gift to Pope John Paul. And what is it? The statue of Mary. Amazingly enough, exactly according to the biblical principle, every aspect of this prophecy has been fulfilled. America is falling in line with the papacy. Not only that, it's welcoming the papacy back and saying, on behalf of all Americans, we welcome you back. Interesting that he uses the word back, though, because that means that he was here and he had to leave, and now he's come back. All I know is that according to the Bible, when I look into Bible prophecy and I see the world coming together under these one superpower, under this one superpower that's being put together in all these pieces, I start to see how this one world government is starting to be pieced together. What's known as the New World Order. I'll cover that in the next lecture. A couple of months or a year or so ago, there were two places that went available in the justice system in America. Number one, Judge Rehnquist, who was 80, his seat became available. And then Judge O'Connor, who was 74, her seat became available. Judge Rehnquist died. He was the chief of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And O'Connor, she resigned about 2 or 3 weeks later. For the first time in history, 2 seats went available on the justice system, as it were, the US Supreme Court. Now remember for a moment that the Bible says that America will start speaking like a dragon. We've showed that. Not only will it start speaking like a dragon, it will force the whole world to bow down to the first beast. And he who does not bow down to the first beast, who's Rome, will be killed. That means that somehow Catholicism has to have a hand over the government of America, that the American government will be a superpower, and that this superpower will be controlled by Catholicism. So Judge Rehnquist and Judge O'Connor, both of their seats go available. In flash, almost in a flash, George Bush replaces both of them. On September 29th, 2005, John Roberts, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was put in the place of Rehnquist. He was placed as the Chief Justice. And as Adistan says in July 20, Rome must be smiling, a brilliant move by Bush to select a Catholic. Okay, what about the second one that was available? It was Rehnquist and it was O'Connor. Rehnquist's position has been filled by a Roman Catholic. What about O'Connor? Also in a flash, George Bush puts this gentleman, Alito, in to the Supreme Court. And we just have to look around and we'll see that Alito and his wife belong to Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament Parish in Roseland, New Jersey. This is according to CNN. Alito attends Mass weekly and his wife teaches religious education classes at the church where his children were confirmed. Here, 2 positions go available and George Bush puts one Catholic and puts a second Catholic in. Now, why is that important? Well, when votes are taken, you have to have certain majorities in order to push certain things through. And the Bible says that there'll have to be a majority inside this government that will lean America to accept and drive out the laws of Rome. Amazingly enough, have a look at the affiliations of the Supreme Court or the justices of the United States of America. You'll see John Roberts, who's Chief Justice, is Catholic. Stephen G. Breyer is Jewish. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is Jewish, etc., etc., etc. And for the first time in history, look at this. Religious affiliation, Catholic, Justices Kennedy, Scalia, Thomas, Roberts, and Alito own 56% of the vote in the American Supreme Court. For the first time in history, here's the country that is warned about in the Bible having the power from the papacy as its substantiating authority within its own justice system. If there's any need to drive home a bill to pass something in favor of Rome, it could be switched now quite easily because 56% of the justices in America are Catholic. This is just a fulfillment of prophecy. But I get so excited about it because I can see we're getting to the end of time. How close are we? Oh, we are so close. And here you have George Bush as in another image at the Red Mass. You see him with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Roberts. President George W. Bush talks with Theodore Cardinal McCarrick as Chief Justice Roberts looks on at the annual Red Mass. A while ago, I read to you this interesting quote, and it didn't quite make sense. It was from Archbishop Quigley in 1903. He said, "When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world." Does this start to make sense now? When an archbishop can write over 100 years ago that the Catholic Church is going to rule the world, or at least that America is going to rule the world, and when it does so, the Catholic Church will rule the world. 20 years ago, that wouldn't have made sense. 50 years ago, it would have been unthinkable. 100 years ago, Protestantism, the people that stood on the Word and the Word alone, was so strong that the people would have laughed in your face if you had said that. Today, Catholicism rules America according to its justice system. We'll be going into more depth and uncovering more things about this one world government in the lecture about the New World Order. Thank you.